Hi, I'm Brian Moran, founder of Government CIO. Welcome to Government CIO Magazine.
Hi, this is Hillary Wax with Government CIO Magazine. Today we will be interviewing Bajinder N, the Deputy Administrative Associate at the U.S. General Services Administration.
There are a number of things that the agencies can do, especially in the current environment for reducing cost. One, clearly, is that the agencies have to have a technology roadmap, that's aligned to the business priorities of the agency. So having that framework allows the agencies to focus on what the priorities are. Beyond that, the agencies need to really think about using shared services, leveraging innovation. So for example, currently across the federal government, cloud computing is a major topic. This is a key point for consolidation and efficiency. The agency should be looking at that. Clearly, GSA has positioned itself to provide those services across the government. Infrastructure as a service, for example, provides the agencies access to cloud computing. So the CIOs and the agencies can begin to consider and contemplate that as part of their modernization strategy. So those are, efficiency touch points. Those are cost-saving touch points, if you will, that the agencies can begin to leverage as part of the overall strategy to reduce the total cost of ownership. There are a number of things that the agencies can begin to leverage in terms of the discipline. As I mentioned before, at the macro level, having a modernization strategy. Again, strategy that really is aligned to the business, that's key. Then there are a number of other things. I mentioned shared services, innovation. Also from an acquisition standpoint, the migration to a performance-based service level agreement, SLA-driven contracts that provides incentives and disincentives to the agencies in terms of improving the delivery of services. Those are the kinds of key components that the agencies can leverage in terms of its discipline that can be applied. Other things at the micro level, if you will, for example, from an application software development perspective, the agencies can begin to leverage reusable components so that every time there's a new business requirement, not any new development needs to be done. Perhaps they can look at the existing inventories, or that the service providers that provide the software applications, they're incentivized to leverage existing reusable components. That discipline, if you will allow the agencies a more disciplined approach. And then finally, in terms of managing end-to-end development of software application, having a very sound program management, project management discipline, that's critical. That is repeatable, that is predictable, and that has tangible outcomes which are defined and then they can be measured. So those are the kinds of things that I think the agencies can apply as part of the discipline. GSA as a whole is extremely proactive in being the leader really from a government-wide perspective. Within the Office of Citizen Services and Innovative Technologies, also known as OCCIT, we work very closely with the White House and OMB in operationalizing some of the new IT policies to bring innovation across the federal government. So we are, in a way, really solution providers. So some of the key areas for innovation that we are providing government-wide is the adoption of cloud computing, right? Clearly, security for the cloud. That's really shifting the entire paradigm. Security now is becoming a business enabler. Specifically, FedRAMP, which is the concept there is very simple. It's a shared services security for cloud. The cloud service providers, once they're authorized, they're given the provisional authorization to operate. Those ATOs then can be leveraged multiple times by the agency. So the whole concept, build once, reuse multiple times. Now that's the level of service or the solution that GSA, OCCIT is providing across the federal government. So that innovation alone itself will allow the acceleration of key innovation technologies like the cloud computing, infrastructure as a service, software as a service, email as a service, and then having a FedRAMP as a security enabler will allow the agencies and the CIOs to immediately provision those services, as opposed to in the legacy environment, where it usually takes, from a agility perspective, 6 to 8 months to provision a new environment. With FedRAMP, they can immediately provision that. So in terms of the response to the business, it's huge. So beyond that, also GSA, OCSIT has become a leader in the whole notion of information sharing. One of the premium platform that we've been working with OMB and the White House in deploying government-wide is known as GSA.GOV. And if you look at some of the metrics, for example, the number of data sets that have been now published, which ultimately, by the way, not only promote transparency and accountability, but they're also at the heart of providing or proliferating innovation across the private sector. So the number of apps that are being developed, mobile apps, has increased tremendously. By the way, that also has become sort of a global phenomena too. In fact, last year we were quite honored to actually have a joint collaboration with the government of India in helping the Indian government implement the open government platform, as well as some of the countries in Africa. So those are some of the innovation initiatives. Shared services is really now at the heart of driving innovation, efficiencies, and reducing the total cost of ownership. So I'll give you a couple of really good examples within GSA and OCSIT. One is the search engine optimization. As part of the services, GSA, OCSIT provides a search engine which is commercial grade, based on Bing architecture, across the federal space, as well as state and local government organizations, really free of charge. And the search engine is now being deployed across multiple websites. The last calculation that we did, we are achieving roughly across the government space roughly $20 million in cost avoidance on an annual basis, which is very significant. Another example is what we call the capital planning and investment control. This is a shared services service that GSA, OCSIT manages and provides. It's a fee-for-service. It allows the agencies to use a single system which is managed through us, managed by GSA, and it provides a very cost-effective mechanism, if you will, for the agencies to report their capital planning and investment control, IT investments, which is a requirement for with OMB, Office of Management Budget. And so the cost avoidance associated with that is significant, roughly $200,000 a year per agency. So as of now, for example, out of the 24 CFO enacted agency, roughly 18 agencies are participating in that. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, the security and cloud, FedRAMP, the projected cost savings or cost avoidance actually to the agency is projected to be about $200,000 per authorization to operate. So in other words, every time or each time an agency leverages the FedRAMP authorization to operate, ATO, the agencies are actually cost avoiding roughly $200,000. So those are some of the examples. Very significant in more ways than just beyond the dollars and cents. So let's take a look at some specific examples. GSA was one of the very first agencies to actually migrate its email infrastructure to the cloud, Google, right? The projected savings from that migration, that modernization to the cloud was roughly $15 million over 5 years, very significant. But if you go beyond that too, in terms of the impact to the environment, I think the estimate was that GSA was actually able to decommission or retire approximately 65 servers from its data center. Now, when you translate that to the next set of metrics, which I think is really cool, which I can really relate to, is that those number of servers actually translate to something like 45, 50 cars taking them off on the highway. So environmental impact is huge, right? So that's one example. The other example is that our primary USA information portal, USA.GOV, that was moved to the cloud. Now, through that endeavor, GSA realized approximately $1.7 million a year cost savings. But beyond the dollars and cents, the agility that it provided in terms of being able to provision changes to the application. The numbers were that in the legacy environment, it would take us 9 months to actually make changes, promote those changes, and apply that to the production environment. With the cloud environment, that went down to a single day. Huge. So now imagine during the national crisis, like the financial crisis, or Sandy, for example. I mean, this is when you want to convey information, disseminate information to the citizen. Being able to react so quickly, you can't put dollars and cents on that. It's the response time, the agility that cloud has provisioned us. Very significant. Yeah, so some of the examples that I talked earlier, at the global level, at the macro level, if you will, I mentioned GOV and the Open Government Platform, which is a derivative of GOV. That clearly has been an excellent example of cross-government, cross-international community collaboration. The platform itself now supports, I believe, close to 500,000 data sets from across the government, so that's a level of collaboration. Plus, there are a number of communities now, communities of interest that GOV platform now supports. So this is for education, for energy, for law enforcement, and so forth. So these are special communities that have really spurred as a result of implementing this platform. And that, the implication there obviously is that there's a tremendous amount of collaboration with these communities. And then beyond just the national borders, internationally, the Open Government Platform, taking the GOV platform and leveraging that to promote transparency and accountability and promote innovation. So countries like India, countries like Rwanda and Ghana, Canada, I mean, these are all partners in that collaboration. So that's a global example. Again, I'll go back to the cloud, the security in cloud. That has been a tremendous example across the federal government of the kinds of collaboration. For the first time, security is now being applied as a business enabler. The traditional viewpoint was that each agency sort of had their own unique security requirements, and oftentimes it was more of a hindrance, if you will. It was a roadblock, a challenge to modernization. Now that paradigm has shifted to more of a collaborative, more of a shared services concept. So that's good examples of those. Yeah. So at the macro level, what I would call the fundamental functional paradigm shift, going from hugging the servers, managing the assets, to managing services. There's a significant difference. The implication there is that the old paradigm, where the agencies and the organization were actually managing their own infrastructure, it really, it provided a lot of barriers in terms of efficiencies and innovations and all that. And there are lots and lots of metrics available that show that in that legacy paradigm, managing the assets, managing the servers, there were lots and lots of inefficiencies. Having migrated to more of a service-based orientation, meaning that no longer the agencies are in a paradigm of managing their own assets, their own data centers, but rather services which are more business-centric. That has made a tremendous difference in terms of the functional shift, if you will, and that's driving efficiency, innovation, and agility. And some of the examples that I mentioned earlier are examples of that paradigm, functional paradigm shift. Very significant. So just to give you some of the examples, in some of the prior engagements, I mentioned earlier that moving to performance-based contracts, SLA-driven contracts, and incentivizing the partnership with the private sector and the government agencies. You know, I use the example of USA.GOV. It would take, on the average, 9 months to introduce a change as a result of business requirement changing or a national event taking place, as a result of applying performance-based contracts as part of the acquisition strategy, applying innovation vis-a-vis cloud computing, and if you look at now the response time, 1 day to make the change and implement the change. That's an example of the agility that we are achieving, and we are seeing that. And there are many, many examples across the space. Yeah, I mean, I think from a macro perspective, not just from a GSA perspective, but really from a federal government-wide perspective, I think this is a really exciting time. The last 3-4 years, if we look across the IT space in the federal government, a lot of the right foundational elements are being put in place that, when combined together, will really allow the agencies to focus on providing rapid response to the agility, to the businesses, to the mission, leverage innovation to reduce the total cost of ownership, and provide the whole concept of secure access to information anywhere, anytime, any platform. So that environment now is here. It's very conducive for that. So when we look at cloud computing, when we look at security for the cloud, when we look at, for example, the digital strategy also, which really focuses on providing APIs, application program interfaces, so that the community can actually develop pretty cool mobile apps, so that regardless of the platform, information can be securely delivered. So when you look at all these components and combine them in a modernization strategy from a CIO's perspective, I think the opportunities are huge in finally achieving the efficiencies, the total cost of ownership reduction, and the agile response. I am excited from the perspective that as a former CIO, I think that IT is in a place where I think it truly can become a business enabler as opposed to a cost driver. And so that paradigm shift has now taken place. A pretty exciting time.